Howdy, everybody. It's Bree, and you are listening to episode 5 of A Piece of Everything Wolverine Origin Comic Review. Yo, what's up, crew? What's been poppin'? Of course, it's me, Bree, and I'm super late again, but I'm back for another episode of A Piece of Everything, where we all relax and come together to discuss and review the best of Marvel, DC, and Star Wars, and more, and aren't afraid to geek out about stuff. So, if you are a newcomer to this newly emerging show, then welcome! I'm super glad to have you. But first of all, before I say anything, I know I have to apologize for the big delay that this episode clearly had. I honestly couldn't tell you what happened between last week and today. I don't know what happened. Time really just got away from me, but I hope you guys didn't forget about me, even though I'm quite a few days late in making this. I am so sorry about that. I've been all over the place, but I certainly haven't forgotten about you guys. But I guess you could say the wait will have been worth it, because today, it's a special day. Why, you may ask? Well, we have our first Marvel-themed review episode today, and it's going to be all about the awesome Marvel comic Wolverine Origin. So, I'm totally in gear for today's show, guys. I'm so ready to talk about it and rant all about it. So, prepare yourself to dive into the depths of Wolverine's past. However, before we get to that, we actually have quite the list of things to discuss for this week, and I think you know what that means. Oh, yeah, that's right. I kept the horn sound effect from last week. I think it fits rather well. I could get used to it. But, anyway, if, you're still kind of lost of what that whole thing means, it means it's time for our weekly comic update. But to our much anticipated list, we actually have a number of topics to touch on today, ranging from all regions of the podcast, Marvel, DC, Star Wars, and even anime, which has been rare to this point, but and only one of the things that I'll be mentioning today is actually like a comic in our comic update, but that's fine. Nobody asked. We'll just roll with it. So yeah, the first thing I wanted to mention that no doubt all us Star Wars fans are freaking out over is the news that our boy Hayden Christensen is gonna be on the Ahsoka show. Woo! Guys, how exciting is this? Now, I'm trying to remember when I found this out exactly. I want to say a few weeks ago. Whatever week it actually got announced, I found out really soon after that. Thanks to my guy, Star Wars Theory. He's awesome. You gotta check out his YouTube channel. But yeah, people are freaking out over this. I'm freaking out over this. But it's stuff worthy of going crazy over, because think about it. At the point in time that this show is gonna happen in like the line of Star Wars universe, like the timeline of Star Wars, since Anakin has already died at this point, we're either gonna be seeing him through means of a flashback or as a Force ghost, or maybe both, which would be so crazy to see either one. But I'm thinking the Force ghost, especially because that would confirm like some Legends material about how he became a Force ghost, which would be super cool to see. But also, like, besides the Kenobi show, which is actually coming out before the Ahsoka show, actually, so he's gonna be playing quite a role in that. So honestly, by the time the Ahsoka show rolls around, we'll probably be used to seeing him by then. But next year is gonna be the first time we're seeing Hayden Christensen as Anakin, like live action classic Anakin, in 16 years since Revenge of the Sith. Now that's just nuts to me. But okay, so granted, I have to say this, I wasn't born yet when that movie came out, but growing up and watching the films, I didn't think that we were ever going to see Hayden as Anakin again. Like, the thought never crossed my mind. And I kind of thought that every big, huge Star Wars related thing was just done. Like, we were kind of done with that. Which I'm sure many people thought for a while, like after the sequels were done, after like stuff like Rebels was done, whatever. But shows like the Kenobi show and the Ahsoka show and future projects like Andor and whatnot mean that we still have huge stuff coming and that we are not done. So Star Wars is really going to get crazy from this year into next year. So get yourselves ready for all of that. And also, speaking of Star Wars shows and projects that are coming up, yesterday, officially released by Disney Plus and Star Wars, we have finally received an official trailer for the Book of Boba Fett. Whoa! Oh my gosh. And I actually came across this at the perfect time. It was late, whatever day it came out. I want to say Monday? Yeah, it was late Monday night, and I was about to go to bed. And before I did, I was like, let me do like a quick YouTube sweep and see what new things they have for me, my recommended, because I don't know, that's kind of just an urge I get. And I saw the trailer just sitting there on the front page, and I had to like squint at the screen and like rub my eyes and double check, like, is this a fan-made thing? Is this real? But yes, it was real. It's very much legit, and it looks awesome. We got Fennec Shand coming back again, and Boba taking over Jabba's empire, saying he's gonna rule it with respect. Like, that sounds awesome. I really want to see how he's gonna do that, and it's gonna be very, very interesting. And you just see, like, all these cool sequences of them both getting in some, like, hot water and, you know, getting themselves in tight corners and no doubt having to fight out of it, and it's looking really good. So we basically have another 2 months left until we get this show. A little less than 2 months, but I'm so glad we got a trailer for it now. It's great, and if you haven't seen it yet, please check it out on YouTube or something. It's really cool, very exciting stuff. So yeah, and that's all of the show things that we have going on for Star Wars. The last thing I wanted to mention that's Star Wars related is I think you guys will remember when I said this last episode that I was like wanting to get the Ronin book, and I did. I eventually scraped the money I have and I got it. So I have not started it yet, and but I'm really excited that I now have it because I've just heard great things about it, and I want to see more of my boy, Ronin, from, you know, Star Wars Visions. So I do have the book now. It's really good news. I'm so glad to be able to share that with you guys. So yeah, I'll be starting that after I finish The Rising Storm, because I don't want to be starting more than one book at once. And I feel like that'll just, like, have me all over the place. But yeah, I have the book, and it's sitting on my shelf, and I will be getting to it soon. So get ready for an update on that once I get to it. So yeah. So that's all of our Star Wars items on the menu for this week's update. Now transitioning over to DC for this week, the comic that I wanted to mention, it did not come out this week. It probably came out a month or so ago, but I was finally able to get my hands on the first issue of Batman the World. So I would not have known about this comic unless DC had not posted a book trailer for it. It was like a video trailer for Batman the World, and it seemed really interesting to me. And basically the premise of it, or at least what I remember, is Batman is going all over the world to, I don't know, expand his Gotham mission, and I want to see how he's going to do that. And it doesn't seem like it's tied to anything else. Like, you have to read this before you read Batman the World. So I was like, let me just jump into it and see what it's like. So, but my local comic book store sold out super quickly for the trades on this, and I couldn't even get one reserved. So, I mean, that must mean, like, a good sign for the quality of the story. So, I mean, that's good at least. But yeah, they were actually supposed to call me back when they get a restock, which honestly may or may not happen. There's like a 50% chance of that happening. So I don't know how I'm going to get the rest of the issues, but, I haven't actually started reading it yet, but actually this is going to be my first more current DC story comic that I've read, because I'm not following with their current stuff that they have coming out now. Like I was telling you guys at least a couple of episodes ago, or last episode, that the stuff that I've been reading is honestly like going back like a good 20-15 years. So I'm still stuck in like 2000, 2006, all that stuff. So I'm excited to actually dive into the newer stuff and see what it's like. But I did take a look at the first couple of pages of it just to check it out. and the art for it is crazy. If you guys have heard of this artist, Lee Bermejo, I don't know how to say it. I think it's Bermejo, Lee Bermejo. He does the art for it, and as soon as you look at it, you can just tell he has a very distinct art style. It has like a level of realism to it where it's just really cool and realistic and dark. And it's very different. So I feel like you would either like it or not like it. Like, it's either a swing or a miss. It's not my favorite, but I like it a lot. Maybe once I read the whole thing, I'll like it even more. But I have seen his art on Reddit before. Somebody posted this piece that he did of Batman and Robin, and I saved it, and it's great. It's really cool. But it's nothing like I've ever really seen before in a comic. So I gotta get to that soon. And honestly, it shouldn't have taken me this long to read one issue. It's just one issue. But I don't know. Again, time, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what time it is. I don't know what day it is. But whatever, I'll get to it soon. So now, that's everything DC, Star Wars. But this one, you guys are really gonna want to hear this. This is super exciting. So, if you didn't know, or if you just forgot, I don't know, which was a close call for me because I almost also forgot. But the My Hero Academia World Heroes Missions movie finally got released in theaters this weekend. Yeah. Oh my goodness, guys. We have been waiting so long for this. It's actually here now. And I was able to see it on opening night, which was last Friday. And it did not disappoint. I absolutely loved it. And also, this was my very first time seeing an anime movie in theaters at all. So it was a great experience. It was banging. It was great. And just to see people, they're like all decked out in like their crazy shirts and hats and wigs and everything. It was so cool to be like among other fans who go crazy about it like I do. But the movie itself was crazy. The fights, the characters, it was just a party. I truly, truly enjoyed it. But actually, thinking about it, it really doesn't give away that much about the new season, like at all. Because I remember on Friday, my brother and I were trying to binge the entire second half of the season. So that's like, I want to say 15 episodes, 12 episodes. We were trying to binge all of that before the movie showing. And even though we tried really, really hard, we had like some buffering issues and some delays and stuff, so we couldn't make it. We were short about like 3 or 4 episodes or something, so we didn't see the season finale. But we still saw the movie that night with a friend, and we didn't get spoiled. I mean, I still have no idea what the season finale for season 5 is, so that's really good news. I will say, though, that some of the end credits for some of the episodes we did watch had some nods to the movie, and, you know, there are some people that I recognize from it. Characters start popping up. So I won't say that the movie's completely ignored in season 5, because it's not, but if you're holding back on seeing the movie just because you're not all caught up, don't do that, because it's not gonna ruin you that way. It's not gonna spoil you that bad. And you gotta see it soon, too, because I checked, and it's only gonna be in theaters for 1 week, and that was a week from Friday. Yeah, it was week. So honestly, and today's Thursday, so it's only gonna be theaters for 1 more day. So don't wait. It's only gonna be in there for a short amount of time left. I don't know how it works for like other theaters near me, but that's my theater. So do not wait too long. But it's great. I'm gonna do a review on it in a few weeks, which I'm very excited for. So, and it's going to be our first anime episode in the show at all. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. It's going to be so cool. But actually, the new season itself, season 5, from what I've seen so far, is no joke. I mean, when I say that, I'm not counting the beginning necessarily, but really, like, in the middle of the season, things start to heat up. And they start going into some really cool details about some of the characters. And if you guys read the Vigilantes manga series for MHA, all I'm going to say is that it's even going to make it better for you. So I'm not going to spoil it. I'm going to leave it at that. But just saying. So do not forget about My Hero Academia, guys. They are going strong with this new season and with this movie. So make sure you go see and watch all of that. Okay, so that's our anime thing on the list. And finally, we're coming down to our Marvel stuff to discuss. So there's a few things that I want to do some countdowns for. for our Marvel movies. First up is Eternals is coming out. Oh my goodness, wait, it's Thursday, so it's coming out today. Today is opening night for Eternals, so don't forget about that. And I won't be seeing it this weekend, but I'm going to be seeing it next weekend, so I'm very excited for that. So the next time I talk to you guys, I will have seen it. So just keep that in mind. And I really want to see how this movie is going to be done, because I was talking to somebody about this, and the point was made that there's essentially, 10 main characters in this film, and besides, Endgame and Infinity War, where we have everybody meet up in one spot, we've never really had that before, where it's 10 people getting spotlighted. So I feel like there's some doubts about it from the fans. Some, people feeling I don't know how it is, but I think it's going to be fine. I'm not too worried about the quality of the movie. I'm sure it's going to be great. So yeah, we have, honestly, it's down to a few hours until this is opening, coming out. So that's Eternals for you. And of course, last and certainly not least is our Spider-Man No Way Home update. And we have a ways to go until it comes out. But as of today, Tuesday, it's Thursday. As of today, November 4th, 2021. Okay, I didn't have to say the year, that was unnecessary. But as of today, we have exactly 42? I think it's 42. We have exactly 42 days until opening night, which will be the night of Tuesday. I keep saying Tuesday, which will be the night of Thursday, December 16th. It's going to be so crazy. Just remember that date, December 16th. Write it in your phone, write it on a sticky note, write it on your forehead. I don't care. Just remember it. Make sure you don't forget. I could not be more excited about this. Every time I think about this movie, every time I see the trailer for it, it's amazing. And I'm trying to picture how packed the theater's going to be, especially on opening night. But honestly, it's probably better to not think about it. It's just gonna get you feeling claustrophobic, but it's totally gonna be worth it. So yeah, I'm gonna try to keep doing countdown updates for this movie until we actually get the movie, and then I'll be able to do a review on it. So that's just thinking about doing a review on No Way Home is mind-boggling. But besides the actual movie, my mind has really been opened to the possibilities of who could be showing up in this film. And I know we are all familiar at this point of the talk of the other Spider-Man coming back and making a cameo, but I was watching a video the other day about Charlie Cox getting questioned about whether he's going to be making a cameo. And if you don't know who that is, he's the actor who played Daredevil in the TV series. And in every video of him being asked if he's in the movie or if this is him in the trailer or whatever, he seemed to try and pick his words so carefully as of what to exactly say and how to respond. So, honestly, after watching that video, which was also kind of funny, just seeing him kind of try to go around the question but not exactly answer the question, I'm kind of sort of convinced that we're going to be seeing him too in some way, shape, or form. But most likely as Matt Murdock / lawyer style. Probably not as full-blown Daredevil, but Matt Murdock trying to help out Peter Parker in his, legal issues, which I couldn't be more happy about that possibility, because Daredevil in the comics rocks. I love him in the comics. I didn't watch the show, but I can definitely speak to the comics and how he is. So I'm hoping really, really hard that my man Matt is going to make an appearance in the movie. But, yeah, and to me, it's hilarious how people are just straight up asking celebrities if they're going to be in this movie now, and to see the reactions, it's the greatest, funniest thing. So, yeah, just keep watching for videos like that. It's amazing. But can you imagine if Marvel made, a Daredevil movie, now? It would be such a hit, and they really should do that, because I want him in the next Saga event or line of movies or whatever. I want him there. But, if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, I guess. I don't know. I guess I'll just have sounded stupid. But, yeah, the movie is getting closer and closer every day. Just 42 more days, and we will be there. So try to hang in there, people. It's coming. So, yeah, that's Spider-Man No Way Home. And with that, my friends, that'll do it for the weekly comic update this week. So, yeah, we covered a lot this time. It was a super productive segment, so I'm happy about it. But now, we can jump into the main event, the main course of today's episode. So, the comic we're going to be talking all about today is Wolverine Origin, written by Paul Jenkins and illustrated by Andy Kubert. And I'm going to be covering issues 1 through 6 today, which is not the whole series, unfortunately, but I had thought it was when I bought this trade. But then I discovered it actually goes up to, I think there's another 5 issues after this or something like that. So there's a whole other trade to this if you didn't just buy the complete collection, which I did not. So if you've read all 12 issues and there's like some big reveal later on that I haven't gotten to yet, and I'm talking about it like it hasn't happened, just ignore me for that moment being. But otherwise, I'm pretty sure everything I have down to cover is valid. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, this comic enlightened me so much about Wolverine. And if you're still somehow wondering what this comic is about, it's not that hard to figure out considering the name of the comic and all, Wolverine Origin. So I guess I don't have to explain that part of it, but just to give you an idea of where and when exactly the comic is taking us here, it goes all the way back to Logan's childhood, and it focuses in on the events that happened in his life and ended up having a big part in shaping him into the gritty person and hero he is in present day. And we also find out other cool things, like where he got his name, names considering Logan and Wolverine. Because we know Wolverine is not his real name, but Logan actually isn't either. So I didn't know that until I read this, but we get backstory on stuff like that and how things like that come into play. And I don't know if you guys know this about Wolverine. There's a really good chance that you do. But one thing about him, on top of some of his more obvious mutant powers, is that he doesn't age. Or he does, but it's just really, really slowly. So when I say we're going all the way back to his younger days, I'm talking like the 1800s, because that's the time he's originally born in. That's where he's from. So that's the time period we're being taken to here. And it becomes apparent as you're reading the comic, but just to say. So yeah, I think that was really interesting, because I was reading it, I was like, what time period is this? Why are we? But it makes sense, considering that element of his powers. But before I read this comic, all I had to go on in reference to Logan's background at all was the X-Men Origins movie that came out, I want to say, in 2002, something like that. I don't know. It came out pretty early on. But I hadn't even watched the movie in at least a couple of years. And honestly, it probably is closer to a few years. So I really didn't know what anything meant. And I had forgotten the whole childhood aspect that the movie showed. But I was motivated to rewatch it after finishing the comic. So it was a really good refresher that I had on it. So from what I've seen, and from what I now know about the movie and the comic, the film is considerably different from the book in some pretty significant ways, but you could tell that they carried over a couple of key moments from the comic to the movie. So that was noticeable about it. But I feel like the comic was able to hit those points and those big moments much better, which, that's usually how it goes. The comic is better than the movie. Not every time, but that's most of the time. But, when you think about the Logan that we know, and, Hugh Jackman playing Wolverine, and the big, tough, buff, beer-drinking guy that we see in the movies and comics and whatnot, you think, this dude was born and raised in the country, chopping trees. Which isn't completely wrong, but really, that's what everyone was thinking about Logan until the point this comic was made, because there was no origin story to him yet for people to go off of at all at this point. So that made the writers and the creators of the story a little hesitant in the first place to begin on the whole concept of revealing where he comes from, just because people love Logan and they didn't want to mess up that image. And that's also why I really like the little interview forward sections in the comics, just because they tell you stuff like this and details and they make you feel smart. So I feel smart now. But yeah, this was my first time reading a comic specifically on Wolverine ever. And the only other time I had indirectly read stuff on him was with Age of Ultron, and yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. And he was bomb in Age of Ultron too. That was such a good comic, and he was actually essential in the story, to tell you the truth, for that comic. But my friends, that is a comic for another day. I promise we will get to it. It's too good for me to not talk about someday. It will happen, but this time we're just sticking to his origin and this comic. But man, Age of Ultron is so good. I definitely recommend. But for now, let's get into our boy Wolverine. So the very first thing that caught my eye about this comic, of course, was the cover. And I'm pretty sure there are different cover arts for this trade. I'm not sure. Between this and the complete collection, they're definitely different. But I feel like there's another one besides the one that I have. But the on the comic that I have, though, on the cover, it shows, like, Logan's hand, and his bone claws are, like, starting to break through his skin. And it kind of looks like what I had originally thought was dark blue, but it's really, like, it looks like black blood and black veins dripping down his hand as the claws are coming out. And there's just something about that cover that really made me want to read this. Like, it just made me stop and be like, what is that? I want to see that. Because it really tells you all you need to know about the story before you read it. You know, like, what it's about. Because you can tell from the looks of it that it's the first time that Logan's claws are coming out. Because obviously they're not adamantium claws yet. So you can tell this is very early on his history. And you automatically get the message that we're being taken into Logan's past here. So I love the cover art. It's awesome. I really like how it's subtle and eye-catching at the same time, because it's just an arm, you know, but it's a very meaningful arm, I guess you could say. But yeah, the cover art was done by Joe Quesada and Richard Isanov. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. So just props to them because it's great. And yeah, in the art in the comic itself, I actually liked it. It has an overall light feel to it. If you've seen it before, you probably can see where I'm coming from with that. But I feel like that feel is really fitting for Logan's origin and everything that's going on inside of the comic. It's not exactly wispy looking, like, say, Jay Lee's art, if you've ever seen what his art looks like, or if you know who he is. But it just has a lighter touch to it, and it's colored and drawn in the way where it's, like, a little eerie at some points, like, chilling. Like, whenever somebody's eyes are drawn, like, super wide, it just gives you chills. I don't know why. I don't know what about it does that, but it just has that effect. And it's very different from the DC comic art that I'm usually used to, where it's like bang, boom, crash, and it'll have like sharper edges and crisper lines sometimes and stronger colors. But with this comic, it's just more settling. So I feel like Marvel usually goes towards this type of art style in their comics a little more than DC does most of the time. And that was actually one of the first things I noticed between Marvel and DC when I first started reading comics, was how some of their art is different. It's not my favorite style, but I like it for this story. It totally fits like it should. So, yeah, there's the art for you. So now, real quick, before I get to the main stuff that I loved about this comic, I just wanted to highlight a couple of details that I was completely oblivious to before this. Like, completely. Did you guys know that Wolverine had an older brother? And when I say older brother, I'm not talking about Dog as a half-brother, but like another brother in the Howlett family. Because apparently, as the comic tells you subtly, and it sprinkles it in there, James, who's also Wolverine, also had another older brother who died, but was also a mutant. And he wasn't mentioned that much, actually. I'm pretty sure he was talked about just like twice or 3 times maybe. So it was kind of easy to forget about, but still it was noticeable whenever you heard about him. So I didn't completely forget. But there was a scene where James was visiting a grave, and on the tombstone, the years read 1885 to 1897. So unless you stopped to read what the engraving said, which I think you were supposed to because it nearly takes up an entire page, but you'd be able to tell that the older brother was 12 years old when he died. So that cemented the thought that there was another sibling around at some point. But we never actually see him, though. And there was a few hints sprinkled in there that he was a mutant because when the whole thing happened with Thomas and Dog breaking into the Howlett house, which we will go into detail a little bit, the mother, Elizabeth, says, like, not you too, James, not again. As in, like, the whole ordeal had happened before with her previous kid. And in an earlier scene, we had seen Rose accidentally walk in on Elizabeth and the maid, and there's a huge scratch scar on her back. And you could tell it's undoubtedly from claws. Like, you could see it. And I looked this up just to confirm, and that scratch was from the older brother, and he indeed was a mutant as well. So, I mean, it was just kind of like a crazy realization that Logan was not the first one in his family to show these signs and to be the way he is. And you could just see because of that, and because of everything else, the mother, Elizabeth, was never quite right throughout the entire comic, like due to the trauma and hecticness that probably came from having a mutant kid already. But seeing James also being affected too was probably just the last straw for her. So we'll get into that later on, a little bit later, what happens with her. But yeah, I just thought that it was nuts how there was an older brother and I didn't know it. So yeah, that's something I had to get off my chest right at the beginning because that was crazy. I thought it was nuts. But okay, so now let's dive into the thick of it. What were the selling points of this book? What worked in this comic? What was the best parts of it, in my opinion? Well, I thought it was kind of cool. Don't get me wrong, it was also confusing, but it was pretty clever how they were misleading you a little bit in the beginning, where they made Dog look just like how Wolverine looks in real time. So we as the readers were being led to believe that Dog was Wolverine as a kid when he was not. And I remember being concerned about that when Dog started to get mean, because I really, really didn't want to believe that Logan was so mean at any point in time in his life where he would deliberately kill a puppy. That was such a sad part. And it was like, ooh, that's bad. But I was relieved to find out that James was Wolverine, which I was 100% sure of only when the claws actually came out. Like, it went from 65% to 85% and then 100% at that moment. But I love the idea, aside from that, I love the idea that Logan grew up as this little sickly rich child, because it's the complete opposite of what he turns out to be as an adult, like stark opposite. But it really does make sense how he gets from the weak rich child that we see to, the my home is wherever my hat is type of guy that we see in the comics now. And that transformation as we go is actually very cool to see. And it just adds that much depth to Wolverine as a character when we see what he's been through that ended up hardening him as a person. So you start and end in very different places with this comic. And of course, the whole kid to Wolverine transformation, it begins in the Hallett house, in that scene where people start getting killed in the end of the second issue going into the beginning of the third issue. And this is, if not, my favorite scene in the entire comic, when James rips out the claws for the first time. And I remember getting to this part and just being so engrossed in what was happening and just shocked, because Logan, and I call him Logan because that's what they call him in the comic, they call him Mr. Logan, but his full name is Thomas Logan, so I'll just keep calling him Thomas. So when Thomas and Dog get into the Hallett house after being kicked out, and they kill my boy John Hallett, which was I was kind of caught off guard with that. And it was so sad because he was the best. He was literally the sweetest guy. It caught me by surprise. But when that happened, it created the perfect storm and the perfect conditions for James to get so upset that his claws came out. And you could just see, like, as soon as he walked in, he didn't even know what was going on, but he just saw his dad get shot, and it was just hecticness after that. And so once that happens, like, James whacks Dog in the face and he charges into Thomas with his hands, and for a second it's like that didn't do anything and now everybody's gonna die. Thomas is gonna shoot everybody, but then he starts bleeding and then he sinks to the floor, and you realize that James just killed Thomas with his claws out and he just attacked Dog with claws. And so instead of just slapping him across the face, he actually scratches him up really bad. And instead of just charging at Thomas in his stomach with his fists, he actually stabs him with his claws, and that's what kills him. And it's just a crazy scene. And after everything's done with that, we get this, like, blood-curdling scream from James, like, wah! That's not how it sounded. But we get this crazy scream from him. And it's super interesting when that happens, because leading into issue 3, we're kind of hearing it from Rose's point of view and what she's thinking as she's seeing all of this unravel and happening. And she describes the scream as, like, James turning into this animal, this gross creature, this thing. And the mother has this horrible reaction to it. She slaps him, and she basically calls him an abomination, and she banishes him from the house. And she ends up killing herself because she can't take having her kid being a mutant and seeing all this death that just happened. It's just too much. So that puts her over the edge. but it was just so crazy and all over the place and so well done, where we have this essential scene. And that's what makes it my favorite part, because it's such an important part for James and Rose, and it leads them to their more transitional period into harder life. And for James, a period from James to Logan to Wolverine. So it starts him off on that track. And just as a little side note about this part, the movie version did have this scene where things go south and people get killed, which is what I meant earlier when I was saying that, some key moments got carried over from the comic into the movie. But the comic did it so much better because we were able to have more time in regards to what was happening and who was involved. And in the movie, James does kill Thomas Logan, but I feel it's less dramatic because you see the claws come out and it's not as big of a reveal. And when Thomas gets stabbed, he just tells James that he's his real father, just like that. Which never happens in the comic, but, we'll get more into detail about who's who because that confused me. And in the movie, Dog never gets scratched by James in the face. So we end up seeing them running off together and living the life as brothers instead of it being him and Rose. So in the movie, they take things in a different direction, but the comic did it better in my opinion. I just feel like it turned out better. So I should probably do a review on that movie at some point because I keep mentioning it. It's not a bad movie. I really like it. But yeah, anyway, just one last thing I wanted to isolate and say I really liked reading in the comic was, this is a little bit later too, after everything with the claws happens and him and Rose move. This is years later, at the point where Logan says that he loves Rose because even as she's getting more and more involved with Smitty, who's a great character, by the way, he says that, and it touched me. It really touched me. I don't know, there weren't any super clear signs to me that he liked her in that way, besides the times that he kept seeing Smitty and Rose together, and he would be visibly upset from that. But I'll be honest with you guys, it kind of broke my heart that he loved her and she didn't love him back in that way. I didn't cry. I don't cry for things, but it struck a nerve with me, I have to say. And the specific scene that I'm referring to was when Logan's chopping wood and Rose is trying to talk to him and figure out why he's upset. And he swings the axe right past her in anger and almost hitting her, actually. And he says really quietly that he always thought it would be the two of them together. And he asks Rose if she'd stay with him and not Smitty. And it's just the sweetest thing. And then she explains that she's getting married to Smitty, so she can't. And you can just see from that response that it makes him feel a combination of anger and sadness, and to see Wolverine as sad, it's just rare. It's a rare sighting. And, he pushes Rose away because he's just sad under all of that anger. And that makes me sad because it's just touching. You could just imagine how different life might have been if it was just him and Rose as a couple, and how much happier things could have turned out to be for him in the end of this. And you just can't help but think about it, or at least I can't. But plus, I like how it correlates to how he turns out to be later on with relationships. I mean, he has Marco for a while, if you guys know who she is. I don't really know how long that ends up lasting, but it does make sense with how solemn he becomes with getting close to people in present day. But I liked how that relationship letdown was put into the story. It sounds terrible when I say that, but it's true. It was a great addition to it and just added layers of this character to, Wolverine. And it just it was sad, but it was really good. Plus, speaking of Marco, I don't know if you guys caught this too, but I thought it was really cool how for 1 second in the middle-ish end of the comic, they alluded to Logan's future connection and fascination with Japanese culture and, what initially sparks that. And it's the part where Logan awkwardly walks in on Smitty and Rose together again, and Smitty gives him some books, and he explains that the books are about samurais and cool Japanese things. And it's interesting because you guys might know this from either the comics or the movie, actually, that Wolverine ends up spending some time in Japan, and he formulates some ties there, one of them being his relationship with Marco. So I liked how that was done. It was a nice little thought-out detail in there for the fans who would know about it. So yeah, that was a lot of what I loved about the story off the bat. But now unfortunately, we gotta be real and talk about some things that didn't work out too well in the comic. Yeah, so, okay, to start off, I'll just say, this isn't something that I feel is truly bad about the comic. Like, this isn't something I would say to you, like, you can't read this because it's bad. This is a terrible part of it. I don't feel it's that bad. It's just, it didn't sit with me completely. But something I had trouble wrapping my head around, and I hinted this a little bit earlier, is the fact that Thomas Logan is James's real father. Because I certainly did not get that message at all when I was reading this. And the only thing that crossed my mind in regards to that whole situation was how Dog and James and the father, Logan, they all looked oddly alike in the beginning. And it was just too noticeable for me to not notice. And, like, when I say James, I mean, like, Wolverine in present day. So they all looked really, really I don't know, they looked very similar. But I don't think that reveal about who's the real father of who was as clear as it should have been. I mean, I totally understand that the writer, Paul Jenkins, might not wanted to have just bluntly say, like, James, I'm your real father, which the movie did, but I feel like the hints that were thrown in there could have been a little bit stronger in some way, or more nods to Elizabeth and Logan's relationship should have been included. I don't know, but I didn't find any of this out later until I actually finished the book. And I think it was when I heard somebody else discussing this on a podcast, which the podcast I was listening to was an episode of Wine and Comics, so shout out to them. But they had mentioned that Logan was James's illegitimate father. And when I heard that, I was like, what did I just hear? There's no way. But then I went asking around on Reddit, and people confirmed it for me that that's true, and then I watched the movie, and then it was confirmed again. So yeah, but on Reddit, some really smart person who helped answer my question, directed me to Wikipedia. And weirdly enough, Wikipedia actually mentions the whole thing really understandably. So when your teachers tell you that Wikipedia is fake, they're lying. It's accurate when it wants to be accurate. So there you go. But anyways, after finding that out, I still wish that there were some more clues as to who's who and who's actually related, because I didn't really get any strong messages of that when I was reading this. So that was the first thing I had a slight issue with. Now, the other thing that I had a huge problem with, like the last thing was a slight issue, this one's pretty big, this really bothered me. It was Rose's death. Like, I'm telling you guys, if you look at the panel where she's running to, like, Logan and trying to get to him, she literally runs herself into his claws as they're out, effectively impaling herself. And the sad thing is, Logan thinks it's his fault that Rose died, and it messes him up after that. But it's not. It's her own fault because she ran straight into him. It just does not make sense to me at all. I mean, at the scene that this was happening in, it was clear Logan was about to kill Dog. He has his claw up in the air, and he's about to, like, pin him to the ground. So Rose wants to stop him from doing that and making a big mistake. But really, all she had to do was, like, grab his arm or something, and that would have gotten his attention. Or, like, even if she tries to block Logan as his claws are coming down on Dog, and he doesn't realize it fast enough and accidentally kills her that way, even that would have made more sense. I mean, again, it sounds terrible to me considering that, but it's so true. It would have been sadder, but I would have preferred that over her freaking out and flailing around and running herself into him. That would have made more sense to me. So that was a bit of a letdown, because, let's be honest, there's better ways to die than that. So I did not like how that was done. That's my opinion. But the whole concept of Rose not making it and dying, it makes sense to me. I get that, but I just don't like how it was done. So that's that. And now that I've gotten that out of my system, that issue, those are really the only things that I didn't like about this comic. And thank goodness, because this book really is awesome. So I'm really glad it was able to sustain that. But of course the latter problem was the biggest one in my eyes, but that's really it, that I didn't like much. So I guess now we can make a transition to our characters and specific things about them. And I know I mentioned this before briefly, but of course a great highlight from this comic overall is the progression of character we get, not just from James, but also from Rose. And I mean, I would say Dog too, which he did change, but he just went from mean to much, much meaner. So, but I guess it counts. I'll just throw his name in there. It wasn't a happy thing to witness what happened to Dog, but it's progression, I guess. And I love the time skip we have, so we can see how everyone ages over time. And it's not really like a time skip. It feels very gradual and very natural as it goes on, but I love having that. And even with the number of years that pass, I feel like the one person who stays the same and changes the least is Rose. Rose was just the perfect character in this book. She was the sweetest thing. I love her. And with her being the one constant Logan had in his life, and her being, like, so supportive and kind to him, even though she herself was shocked at what Logan was with his powers, she loved him like a brother and took care of him. She didn't love him like, she loved Smitty, but she loved him. And it's a shame that she died, because she was such an awesome character and kind of essential for things to keep moving forward in the plot with Logan. So she's definitely one of the top people in the novel. I think that's pretty clear, too. I mean, come on, how could you not make her a VIP? But besides her, who turned out, she didn't turn out the best because she died, but she was kind of the best, and the person who turned out the worst, really, was Dog. And it's a bummer what happened with him, because he actually started off as a genuinely good kid. He was actually, nice in the earlier days. And I feel like a good example of this is, a part in the beginning of the book where James, he falls into a lake or something, and he can't swim, so Dog saves him from drowning, and he's just genuinely concerned about James and Rose, and I don't know, it was great to see that trio going with James, Rose, and him. But unfortunately, the father really messes it up, and every other day he's beating him, and that's really what ends up making him mean and bad, is how badly his dad brought him up. And I think a lot of Dog's dad's strong opinion on him staying away from James and Rose and the Howlett house is because of what happened between him and the mother, Elizabeth Howlett. And there's this part in the first issue where it's Christmas, and Thomas Logan, is at the bar getting drunk, talking about how wealthy the Howletts act, and how they're too good for him, and how John Howlett doesn't know how to treat his wife. So you could just see from that there's a lot of anger left over from, the affair that happens between Elizabeth and him. But anyway, when Dog comes home with that really nice gift he got from the Howletts and from hanging out with the Howletts, it's totally the wrong thing at the wrong time. So the dad was never nice to begin with. He was always pretty bad, but I definitely think that it had something to do with the mom and everything that went down with her that made him so hard on Dog every time he hung out with them. But, I mean, yeah, that was Dog when he was younger. But then after his dad got killed by James, I didn't actually really think about this much, but it basically ended up just being him and the mean grandfather, which probably made him even worse as a person, because the grandfather was so mean. He was terrible, and he was mean to everyone pretty much, especially to his own son, John Howlett, super nice guy. And I was trying to think if he knew about the whole affair that went down between Elizabeth and Thomas, because that might explain why he was so firm on Dog never coming into the house and Logan never being treated with respect. He might not have, but yeah, he might have just been really, really mean. I'm not sure. But even after all of that happens, and everything happens with James and the mother, killing herself and everything, he still had an 100th of an ounce of kindness in him, where he gave Rose and James some money to get away from town and start a new life somewhere after everyone discovered James's secret of being a mutant, which I was very surprised when he did that. I mean, he did it very reluctantly, and he was making some mean comments about James being an animal and how revolting he was. So that kind of toned it down how nice the act was, but that was more than I thought he'd give at all. However, later on, he does end up undoing that semi-nice deed anyway, when he sends Dog to go hunt them down years later at the end of the comic. So that really is what leads to major problems. So because of that, all in all, the grandfather was just a terrible person. He just canceled out his act of kindness there. But if he did know about the affair that happened, then that would mean that poor John Howlett got stuck in the middle of the problem, because I'm pretty sure he did not know. And it's crazy how different he and his dad were. They could not be more opposite. The grandfather was the meanest guy, but he was the nicest guy ever, and it was terrible to see him die too, but I loved how kind he was to just everyone, no matter what. He was awesome, and it's much better that James got raised by someone as nice as him, because I feel like it's that kindness from his not real father that made him save the kid when they had that cave-in at the camp, or when he was fighting against Smitty in the cage for money, to let him win so he can move away with Rose, or, made him kind enough to not fight back every time Cookie pounded him for no reason. I hated that dude. It's so hard to think of Wolverine as being bullied ever, so it was crazy to see how calm he was every time he would get beat up out of nowhere. And to be honest, it was kind of tough to watch because, that's my boy. Don't touch my boy. But I feel like his reactions to all those situations could have had something to do with the fact that he had a good parent who instilled good qualities and values in him for the time being when he was younger, even if it wasn't his real dad. So it was cool how they showed that even though Logan was getting tougher and tougher in his new environment once he moved to the camp, he never stopped being a good person. So it's always nice to read about that. And I feel like I have to mention, speaking of them being in the camp, I feel like I have to mention the whole process of Logan becoming like a Wolverine when he would run in the wild with the wolves and stuff. That was very interesting because it shows how more and more of his other side, or as Rose calls it, his dark side comes out, his mutant part of himself. And there's a part in the book where Rose sees him hunt this deer out of nowhere super efficiently, and she asks him how he does it, and he describes it as an urge. So you can see he hasn't completely let go of his mutation, but some part of him embraces it, which is what I'm thinking the scenes with him running around with the wolves probably represents. And I think those scenes were also meant to serve as a gradual change from Logan to Wolverine, and it adds even more to his story. So yeah, and just to transition into another thought, even though it's Wolverine's story and the tale of his origin, obviously, a lot of, if not most, of the comic is told through Rose's eyes in the form of a diary, which I wasn't sure how I felt about that at first. I remember just being a little bit skeptical about it and thinking this is kind of corny, but I got used to it, and thinking about how it's written in older style language and stuff, you have to get used to that, but that can be said for any part of the book, honestly. But looking at it now, I think it was able to add some depth overall to the plot and just how it was told, because we're reading it from someone who's been there every step of the way, it just has a different effect. For example, instead of a random narrator saying Logan has changed a lot since he left his old life, you could have Rose say, Logan, I see you've changed a lot since you got here, because she's seen the change and she's been there for it. So it's not that much different in wording when you compare it, but it just strikes differently and it means more. So I appreciated that. And in terms of the plot in general, I'd say it's very interesting because of what it reveals about Logan's life and the things he went through, obviously. But if you're the type of person who equates interest with action, then it wouldn't be interesting to you because there's really no action going on. And it's definitely not action-packed like some other comics you will have and see with big crashes and Batman versus Superman battles or whatever. You don't get anything like that, but just more of the things Logan has to deal with and life. And when I say in life, I wouldn't call it a slice of life comic, but it shows his life, if that makes sense. So you'll see stuff like fist fights, maybe some slaps thrown in here and there, but nothing on a crazy action level. But that's what makes it so good, is that it can be so intriguing, but it doesn't have much action involved, and it can still pull you in. And I feel like if a comic can do that, then it's definitely and totally worth reading. So I really liked that about it, and I didn't really think about that until after I had finished it, but it's true that there's not much crazy action stuff going on, but it's still really, really good quality. And in regards to the predictability of things that happen in the comic, I'd say the only thing you'd probably be able to call slightly in advance is Rose's death. But only just as she's running towards Logan and stabs herself. When I saw her panicking and trying to get through the crowd to Logan, I knew the situation was looking too good. But other than that, I was very surprised at different parts of the story. I wasn't expecting Thomas to shoot John Howlett like that, or the mother to pull a gun on herself. And I really wasn't expecting Logan to tell Rose that he loved her. I mean, you can see hints, but I wasn't explicitly thinking about him saying that to her, if you know what I mean. And I was thrown off by the whole, trying to figure out who's actually Wolverine at the beginning of the comic game. So I guess those are all things you could have inferred, but none of them seemed utterly out in the open to me, which is good because it keeps you turning the pages to see, how things end up for yourself. And speaking how things end up, I know we've already discussed my irritation with Rose's demise. That made no sense. But something else towards the end of the book that I noticed is that we really don't see what happens with Dog. I mean, at least not in these first 6 issues. Because he shows up after, trying to hunt down and locate Logan and Rose. And he starts tossing Logan around, and he somehow... Wolverine pins him down, and he's, about to claw him to the floor, and then the whole thing happens with Rose. And after that, we get flashed forward to an entirely different scene sometime in the close future. So we don't actually see where Dog goes after that, but I still think that's fitting, because I don't imagine that Logan and Dog would keep fighting after Rose dies, because even though Dog is nuts and he's terrible, Rose still had a really big part in both of their lives. And I can also see Logan probably freaking out immediately after that and running off into the wild, which is where we find him in the very end of things. And that scene where Smitty is trying to look for him and he's calling out to Logan, trying to get him to come back, is super, super sad, because as he's yelling his name, Logan's never going to answer him. Because in a way, he really can't live with what happened, and he feels like he's responsible for it. Because, how hard would it be to look in the eyes of, the sweetest guy ever and your best friend with you feeling like you killed his soon-to-be wife? It's just an impossible thing to face. And, oh my goodness, now that I just thought about it, I realized it's super comparable to what happens to Ray Palmer in DC Comics right before Infinite Crisis. Oh, man, that's the saddest thing ever. I will not spoil that for you, though. That's for another time. But that's, it's kind of comparable if you have read what I'm talking about and if you catch my drift. But also when you think back to, I was saying this before, but when you think back to what a great relationship Smitty and Logan developed over the years, it makes it even worse because they were brothers. And the guys in the camp even called Logan, little Smitty. So to see two people who are so close now end up so distant in the end, it's a shame. It's terrible. But yeah, even if Logan went with Smitty, all he'd be reminded of would be Rose, and that would just be too much. But you end up feeling just terrible for Smitty, because now his best girl is gone, and he needs his friend to help him through it, and it's just not gonna happen. And that's also the case for Logan too, who's now, fully Wolverine, because he's made that side of himself his entire life now, just to cut himself off from everything and everyone after what happened. And you could just see by him doing that how bad he feels about everything. But it's really the worst when Smitty says, we both lost our Rose and I can't get through this on my own, I need you. And as he's realizing Logan's not going to answer, and as we as the readers can physically see him going off with the wolves and walking away, Smitty just starts yelling louder and louder, and it all leaves you feeling so down. It's still the perfect ending, and it's fitting, but it's not happy, and that just, crushes you. And then, as if that's not enough, we see stupid Cookie. I hate this dude so much. He's going through Rose's stuff, and he takes the golden necklace, which I honestly still know nothing about. I know it has something to do with their earlier days, but I don't remember how it came into the picture, so it has some sort of significance, I just can't remember. But he steals it, and then he tosses Rose's diary into the fire, which, as the readers know, is the entire story we just read. It's literally the equivalent of the whole comic, Wolverine's entire life, up in flames. And it's so frustrating because it makes you want to slap the guy, because it means Logan never reads any of it, and he never reads what Rose wanted to tell him. Oi, it's terrible, but this comic, even with all these sad things happening, it makes you feel something. It invokes your emotions all the way up till the end. And again, if a comic can do that for you, it's a keeper. So I definitely feel that way about it. So all in all, I think this comic, on a scale of 1 to 10, is somewhere between an 8 or a 9. So I'll just give it like an 8.7 out of 10. So to me, that seems very fair. The characters were great. The plot was where it needed to be. And we came into this wanting to know more about, Logan, right? To get more awesome, crazy knowledge about him. And did we get that? Absolutely, 100%. So if this is a character you're looking to get into more or read more about in the future, or if you're already a Wolverine fan and you would like to see where your boy comes from, this is definitely for you. Absolutely. So I would recommend it to anybody who needs Marvel Comics to read or just wants to know more about Wolverine in general. So, alrighty, my peeps, it looks like this will wrap it all up for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed our first Marvel Week review. I had a blast doing it myself. And I'll be seeing you guys next time for a Star Wars week, where we will be talking all about Light of the Jedi. I'm super excited about this, because it's gonna get us started on our High Republic stuff, so it's gonna be awesome. Unfortunately, I'm not gonna be doing like another review this Sunday, just because of how late this review is. It would just, I wouldn't have the time. So, but our next episode is gonna be on the 14th, so that's gonna be next Sunday. So I look forward to talking some Star Wars with you guys then. And on our next Marvel week, which will be 3 weeks from now, I forget the exact number, and I don't know the exact date either. But next Marvel week, we're going to be talking about Shang-Chi, which I'm very excited. It's going to be like our first Marvel movie review, so that's going to be awesome. So yeah, stay tuned for that, guys. And as always, don't forget to spread the word about the show. If you'd like to send in a review of your own for me to read to all the listeners, or if you'd just like to contact me, please be sure to shoot over an email at apieceofeverythingreviews@gmail.com, and I will get back to you. Also, don't be shy to leave a review for this podcast on iTunes or on whatever platform you listen to your podcasts on. That would be awesome. Thank you as always for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and I can't wait to see you guys all next time. Ciao!